Welcome to YG Roundtable, built by Weiss and sponsored by Health Payment Systems. YG Roundtable is a place where we explore big ideas and we hear about trends and things that you need to know. It's a way you can stay in touch. Today I'm bringing in some subject matter experts for their thoughts on the opportunity for startups in Milwaukee. Let's meet the panel.
I'm Matt Cordio. I am co-founder of Startup Milwaukee and Startup Wisconsin. We're focused on advancing Wisconsin's technology ecosystem, connecting various nodes in the ecosystem, whether it's entrepreneurs, investors, service providers, and talent. I'm also co-founder and president of Skills Pipeline, which is a technology recruitment firm.
I'm Dana Guthrie, Managing Director and Founder of Alchemy Investors. We focus on making investments in Milwaukee in seed and early stage startups.
Great to have you both on the show today, and we're talking about something that, hitting you guys up off stage, you're both really excited about, the opportunity for startups in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. And Matt, let's start with you, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Why are startups so important to a local economy?
So when you look at kind of how jobs are created in an economy, the majority of new jobs are coming from high growth, innovative startups, and it's critically important that we have a strong infrastructure to support those high growth startups here in the region. And I think one of the promising things is that infrastructure is continuing to be built here, and it's now an exciting time given the recent disruptions in the economy. I think that's usually where you see new opportunity and new ideas come from. So startups are just kind of critically important to our job growth and economic vitality in the region, and that's why I'm all about them, and I'm sure Dana is too.
Absolutely.
So what about infrastructure? What kind of infrastructure are we talking? Because, not being in the startup economy, I think of infrastructure, I think roads and bridges, but that's not what you're talking about. What kind of infrastructure do you mean?
No. And by infrastructure, I think Matt may be just referring to, for example, the support mechanism around the ecosystem. So whether that's support groups for encouraging and helping startups to grow from an idea to a viable revenue generating business, or that's capital being infused into the economy to support those startups and keep them here in our local economy. So
that kind of support is, I've got an idea, but I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
How do I turn it into something that generates dollars?
Absolutely. How do you start to grow that thing from just a little seedling, a little idea, to something that's revenue generating? And ultimately, what I believe happens is when you have a group of entrepreneurs who are successful in the ecosystem, they end up coming back and reinvesting in that ecosystem for the next group of entrepreneurs.
That's when it's really healthy, when that sort of thing is happening. Well, one of the support groups, we'll talk about it later, is Matt's group, Startup Milwaukee and Startup Wisconsin. But Dana, I want to learn a little bit from you as someone that's on the investment side of things. You weren't always in the startup space. What drew you to it, and how did you start the firm that you run?
No, I actually came up through corporate America.
Sorry about that.
I know. So I worked for Johnson Controls, right? And I always make the joke that MSOE, Milwaukee School of Engineering, brought me to Milwaukee, and Johnson Controls kept me here. But really, it's three things that kind of led to me deciding to start my investment firm. One, I had the background in technology. Two, I came up in a corporation where my role at Johnson Controls was to work as essentially an internal CEO, as a product manager. So you're always trying to find new streams of revenue and everything to grow the business within the larger business. But more importantly, it was all around ownership. So for me, entrepreneurship is the great equalizer. So historically, there was always a need for a large capital infusion or a large amount of capital in order to start a business. Just think about it. Manufacturing space, you need a building, you need physical infrastructure. We live in a digital world today where everyone has the opportunity to take their idea and with a smaller amount of capital make that thing come to fruition and grow their business. So like I said, I view entrepreneurship as the great equalizer. It allows folks who have otherwise been locked out of these types of opportunities for wealth generation and economic development to play a part in it.
You had kind of an interesting invitation into this group as you were at Johnson Controls, and you talk about like a product manager is kind of like an internal CEO, so you could feel the buzz of creating revenue and growing something, without risking too much altogether. So do you remember any of those early wins that made you go, oh, I like this. This is cool. Do you remember anything like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember both the wins, so the successes after it happens, but I also remember the stress of, having to put together the projections and the go-to-market plan and all of the behind-the-scenes work that it takes to make that thing tick and to make it run. So yeah.
So that was a great way to learn and get in the game. You said something that I want to ask Matt about. So because of the lower cost of entry, maybe that wasn't the case in 1980, whatever. Has that even facilitated the opportunity for so much focus on startups because it just costs so much less to get into the game?
I think that's one of the advantages for kind of the times that we're living in, right? The 1980s, I don't really remember. I was born in 1989, but I think that. But I think that as costs to develop technology go down, it really makes anyone able to start a company wherever they are. So as long as they have kind of an idea. The ability to build technology, they can build it, from their home in Milwaukee, and that hasn't always been the case. A lot of startup activity, obviously, emanated from Silicon Valley. It, has not always been. Milwaukee hasn't been a technology-focused city, but we do have those great stories of large. Financial technology companies like Fiserv or FIS that have been built here. Those are great early software companies. And we have a lot of more mid-sized companies too that have embraced technology early. So that talent has been here. And now that the cost for them to go out, a technologist to go out on their own and build a new product, I think that's, really what the great opportunity is today.
From the investment side, you get to place more bets, right? Because it costs less to back a company. Does that diversify your risk, or does that distract you from focusing on one of the others? Like, what's it like from the investor side, knowing that you can have more pieces on the playing field to see how they do?
No. I think it's actually it's a great thing, right? It allows you to have more numbers. So investment is just a game of numbers. The more opportunities that you can see and bring to the table, the higher likelihood of meeting your investor return commitment. So to Matt's point. Within Milwaukee, we haven't historically had that technology kind of reputation, but with large corporations like Fiserv, like Northwestern Mutual, like Johnson Controls, you start to develop that reputation and bring that type of tech talent. And actually, a statistic that I recently had this come across my desk. I read that Milwaukee actually has the largest number of engineers per capita relative to the rest of the U.S.
Wow, I would never know that.
I wouldn't have guessed that either. I was
shocked
by
too.
it. I'm shocked by it. I can send you the statistic. That's real. MMAC, I believe, did a report on it.
Bartenders per capita, yes.
Yeah,
Cows
yes.
per capita, perhaps. Engineers, I
Maybe
never would have known
Mesui
that.
is doing that. I don't know.
You mentioned about how equity and entrepreneurialism is the great equalizer. Can you talk about that? How are we doing about spreading opportunity for all when it comes to startups?
Yeah, so I think that there's always room for improvement on that. No matter where you go, we can go to Silicon Valley and they would say it's probably not enough capital there. But specifically in the Milwaukee ecosystem, I do think that there's a gap there, and there probably could be more funding going to the area. Like I said, investments, if you speak to most investors, they would say that investing is just a game of numbers. Well, Milwaukee is Wisconsin's most populous city. So you would expect that there should be some sort of decent infusion of capital going to that area. And when it does, because it's getting there, you're seeing large corporations like Northwestern Mutual and others getting involved in that. And as it develops, not only will Milwaukee win, but Wisconsin as a state will win as well.
Great discussion so far. We'll be back with more with Dana Guthrie and Matt Cordio in just a minute on YG Roundtable, built by Max Weiss and sponsored by Health Payment Systems.
Max Weiss is a company that does it right the first time. A company that sets the curve in excellence. Rolled, curved, formed, forged, fabricated. A company that delivers on time. A company that drives innovation forward. A company that has satisfied customers for over 75 years. Anything metal, Max Weiss Company. Call or visit us online to learn more about Max Weiss Company.
For more than 80% of families, today's medical billing practices are confusing. At HPS, our goal is to improve the healthcare experience for the patient by making medical bill payments less stressful. In Wisconsin, that's all made possible by our comprehensive independent healthcare provider network. We simplify billing and lower costs for everyone involved in healthcare and offer various ways for individuals to pay without breaking the bank.
So how are we doing on spreading the funds around and giving everyone an opportunity to start their own company? Is the money going to all communities? Do we have entrepreneurs, people of color that are starting their own businesses, or is the money still going to the same people it always went to?
It's going where it always has been, and there are a number of reasons for that, pattern matching on the side of it, the investor and that sort of thing. If you look at it statistically, of the $300 million that went into the Wisconsin venture capital ecosystem, about 10% of that went to Milwaukee County, and less than 5% went to the city of Milwaukee, which is has a large population of people of color in that area. So unfortunately, we're not, but there are organizations like myself and others who are really trying to step up and to help to fill that gap.
And does that support part of the reason why you're so excited to do what you're doing and the great opportunities for startups right now, is that there's this untapped market of entrepreneurs to fund?
Oh, absolutely. And Milwaukee is a unique system. It's a unique city. It's so diverse and has so much talent here. If we uplift everyone, then the entire ecosystem wins.
So is this a supply or a demand issue, do you think? Are there not enough aspiring entrepreneurs, or is there not enough money to fund those that want funding?
The chicken and the egg
Right?
question. Yeah. To me, it doesn't matter. Everyone needs to do their job. So Matt is doing Startup Milwaukee Week. You have great grassroots organizations like Young Enterprise Society and their Blueprint program, 4M out of Northwestern Mutual. All of those organizations are there to help increase the number of quality entrepreneurs and startups in the space. On the flip side, we need the investment coming as well. We need the local investment coming as well. So whether it's chicken or egg, I don't think matters. I think we all have a role to play in the ecosystem. I'm trying to do my part in that, and I hope that others join me, and we'll go from there.
Well, I know that that's been a focus for Startup Wisconsin and Startup Milwaukee. For years, you've been on this issue. So what are you seeing when you're talking about this issue specifically with startups and with investors?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of kind of the funding environment in Milwaukee, for the largest city in the state of Wisconsin to only receive 10% of investment dollars in the state, kind of indicates that we need to really focus on building up that infrastructure and making sure there is capital here to invest in early stage startups. And I think that the city has long faced challenges in terms of supporting people with new ideas and different backgrounds. And I think that there are so many organizations, as Dana mentioned, focused on trying to highlight the resources and the entrepreneurs that are here, and bring together the investors that are here and committed to the region. That I think we're in for some exciting times in the next 5 years, 10 years. It really takes 10 to 20 years to develop a really strong entrepreneurial ecosystem in a city. And I can tell you, Startup Milwaukee's been around for only 9 years, and there's been an immense amount of activity coming out of the city in those past 9 years. The large companies, groups like Dana's Alchemy, Angels, and Young Enterprise Society, Generator, great organizations. The universities have gotten involved in building the startup community, and that's really what it's going to take. And I think we've got another 10 years, and we'll have a really strong ecosystem by then, hopefully.
Does 10 years sound optimistic to you, or do you think we can get there in 10 years?
Oh, we can get there.
We can get there. With you two leading
hopefully
the way.
before 10 years.
Yeah, before 10 years. All right, well, let's do that then. Let's do a reality check, because it's a real blessing to have two people that are as deeply involved in, as you say, the ecosystem. 1 is we have no startup scene at all. 10 is we're San Francisco, like we are the startup capital of the world. Where are we now? And based on Milwaukee and our culture, where can we get to?
That's actually a good question. With the, and I'm going to qualify my response to that with the giving the amount of support organizations, the generators and folks who are helping to support the ecosystem, giving the corporations who have stepped up to the plate, the ones that have. I would put us at a 4 or 5. Okay. And I know that we can get to a 10. The really cool part of about Milwaukee also is we have that small city, but we have the big city vibe. So we're small enough to where you can come into Milwaukee with an idea, actually make a really big impact in the area. Yet we're large enough to where we have large corporations and businesses in the area where you can do true customer discovery or customer validation. So I think that we get the we're not Chicago and people joke about that, but there are bonuses to being in Milwaukee. It's more affordable. It's a digital age, so I don't have to be in Silicon Valley to do business with Silicon Valley and to do business with customers and that sort of thing. So I think that Milwaukee is actually in a good space right now. There's a lot of opportunity.
So we're at a 4, could get to a 10.
Could get to a 10.
That'd be pretty cool. All right, a 10 is
I'm
good.
optimistic.
Optimistic, and I love it. All right, where are we now?
I'm
and where
glad
do you think we
Dana
can get
answered
to?
the question first.
Yeah.
Because I would actually agree with her on her assessment. I think we're right now between that 4 and 5. And, I think it takes time, but I'm optimistic about the amount of activity that's happened in the past 2 to 3 years is like triple what happened the first, 5 years before that.
Yeah.
So, and I think there are, just exciting developments in the community, and we're gaining momentum, and we really don't have any other choice but to embrace technology and embrace high growth entrepreneurship, because that is our economy in the 21st century, and we're getting there, and it's exciting.
So let's talk for a second about startups in general. And to you two, this will seem like a really basic question, so just humor me. But most people, when they think of startups that aren't in the ecosystem, I think they think of, I'm creating an app or a website, it's all digital, and I'm going to go public and make billions. Like, that's not the only kind of startup you're talking about, right? Or is it literally just that?
Correct. I think there are also a lot of different definitions of startup, and the way that I would define it is a company that really goes into business with the intention of eventually having some sort of liquidity event, whether it's an IPO and they go public, or it's a strategic acquisition by a company. I think that technology is often at play in startups, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the only it doesn't need to be an app. It doesn't need to, in fact, it probably shouldn't be an app, because apps I don't think are cool anymore.
Yeah,
Not apps.
But it might have an app as an aspect to it,
Yeah.
and I think that really it's a technology-enabled business model. It's really a startup is led by a founder or founders who have that desire to build something in a large market and scale it, and not just stay here in Milwaukee, but take their product to the world. And Milwaukee's done that for centuries, over a century. From Johnson Controls, which started here and developed an early thermostat, to Northwestern Mutual, which is a pioneer in the life insurance industry. We have this Harley Davidson. We've built iconic brands here in Milwaukee, and right now people I think are thinking iconic brands look like Apple, Google, Facebook. We'd like to see companies like that founded here in Milwaukee, because we do have the capability to build and scale and grow. We just need to get back to those roots.
So as an investor, I'm sure you heard hockey stick and liquidity, and you're like, ooh, I like those things.
Love
So
those words.
does that define what you would think a startup would be?
Absolutely. Matt hit the nail on the head. Any business where your goal is to essentially grow that thing to a point of acquisition, IPO, M&A deal, whatever that looks like. The really cool thing about Milwaukee is, to Matt's point, we have the entrepreneurial spirit in it. So I drive around Milwaukee, and you mentioned all of the big ones, Matt. You mentioned the Johnson Controls and the Northwestern Mutuals, but there are, if you look around, there are a lot of businesses built in Milwaukee that are doing really well. And it may look like a building that you would never expect a startup to have run out of that thing, but they started there and they've grown, and maybe they're going to get go through an acquisition at some point. So I think that Milwaukee has that in their blood. And then the other thing that I'll mention is just that it doesn't always have to be sexy technology. To me, some of the best deals and some of the best startup ideas that I've seen are things that solve really prominent problems, like very obvious problems, with just a simple solution. And so that's something that I'm always looking for as well. Like, you have to be able to go into a room with folks and be able to explain your concept and idea, and just people know, like, yeah, you know what, that's the problem. We should do something about that.
Yeah, let's fix that and make a lot of money.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
and it's simple.
I would say, too, traditionally Milwaukee's been really good at building technology that is not sexy. And that's probably why people don't realize, like, Milwaukee has a tech scene, a startup scene at times. Is but the zip file, for example, was invented here, and the company that invented that, PKware, is still here employing 75, 100 people. And we do have that heritage of, we had some early internet exploration that happened here in Milwaukee too. So we do have, that tech undercurrent, but it's not super sexy. Xywave, which has been one of the most successful software as a service companies that has been built and scaled here, they make they make software for insurance brokers. Not a sexy business, but it makes a lot of money.
It makes it.
A lot of people have insurance.
I don't think I've ever heard Milwaukee home of the zip file. That's something I learned today. That's great.
It is a thing.
You mentioned the ecosystem. There are founders, funders, but you can participate in the ecosystem and not be a founder or not be someone that's doing the funding. Is there a choke point in the ecosystem, like there's not enough of this type of people or not enough of this type of profession, that if you could wave a magic wand, there'd be more, I don't know, business managers or more folks that can build this kind of software? Like, is there any choke point in our ecosystem that you wish some of these subject matter experts could rush in and fill?
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily a choke point on it. I just think that there needs to be better connection and communication between them. But obviously, any type of business advisor, we have all of the C-suite level and CEOs of these corporations have a lot of experience in running businesses either internal to their larger corporation or outside of those things. Coming back and mentoring folks within the ecosystem, young folks in the ecosystem, that'll always help. Funding obviously is one of those things that help, and then the other piece is making sure that and Matt is playing a big role in this, but making sure that the tech talent is tied to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. An example of that is I went through MSOE, and as a part of the MSOE curriculum, at least the computer engineering program that I went through, we did a senior design project at the end of our entire senior year. There are great ideas that happen in those senior design projects. Obviously, they're not commercialized or anything like that, but what happens afterwards? All those great ideas, oftentimes solving very real problems with simple, technology-enabled solutions, they just drop by the wayside, right? And so ensuring that those folks, the programmers and the developers are connected enough to the startup community where they can support and provide assistance and maybe even get hired by a startup instead of getting hired by Johnson Controls.
That's right. So I'm putting you on the spot with this question, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's interesting. So Startup Wisconsin and Startup Milwaukee are a given on this question, okay? So you can't say that, okay? We know that's the thing. But if you're thinking about starting up in this ecosystem, who's on the Mount Rushmore of startup right now? I would imagine MSOE would be one of the groups that's helping people understand what this ecosystem is all about. I mean, who else is really important that if I'm thinking about the startup opportunity in Wisconsin and Milwaukee, I might want to start paying attention to these groups because you mentioned Generator and some others. Who else is out there that can help people on their way?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of them, and we're certainly going to miss some of them.
Yeah,
probably,
we'll put it in the show notes. If anyone we
but-
forget, we'll put it in the show notes.
You know, I think that if you just have, if you're working a 9 to 5 and you have an idea that could be transformed into an app, you know, not an app.
Not
as
an app.
As
We
just
learned that,
discussed,
not an app.
into a technology-enabled business. You know, there are programs like G-Beta, which is run by Generator, which is a very early stage pre-accelerator program that has kind of a curriculum that guides entrepreneurs through kind of an 8-week validation of their idea. There's a similar program, 4M, which is led by the Milwaukee Tech Coalition, and they offer a similar curriculum in customer discovery, like going and they make you go talk to customers. If you're a researcher, UWM has iCore, which is like a really great national program that you know, works with research entrepreneurs and commercializing their technology. So there are those Young Enterprising Society, which we mentioned before too, working on urban tech acceleration. Probably
That's a great list. Did he forget anyone? Because that's a great list.
No, I think you hit the big ones. Yeah, I think you hit the big ones.
What about traditional business? So I'm not in the startup ecosystem, but I'd love to help and I'd love to collaborate. Is there value in traditional businesses helping in this ecosystem, or do you have to be a part of it to really be of use to people that are inside of it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. No, I think that absolutely traditional businesses, one, you can help by potentially being a customer.
That's true.
To some of these startups and allowing them to vet their idea and go through their customer discovery and validation process with you. And so I think that it would be a big benefit for some of our corporations to work with us in that capacity. And when we say ecosystem, right, like, and you keep mentioning this around folks getting involved, a part of being inside of an ecosystem is it's a mutually beneficial deal, right? So it's everyone's working together to put together this kind of self-sustaining community around a similar idea, entrepreneurship in this case, but it's mutually beneficial, meaning everyone is contributing to and getting something out of this deal. And so whether that's the large corporations, the mid-sized businesses that we have in Milwaukee that are doing well and potentially generating millions of dollars and thousands of dollars in revenue, or the startup scene, the entrepreneur just getting started, the more we work together on that, the better the ecosystem is.
Well, I do want to make sure that we put the voice of the potential entrepreneur into this conversation. So I'm really curious from your points of view, and this is just your personal opinion. I won't hold it to you as Startup Wisconsin or something, but what do you see that's out there? Are there emerging areas that you're seeing entrepreneurs dive into that you think there's something that's going to come in this general sector, so an entrepreneur might want to look in this side of things? And from an investor's point of view, maybe some things that excite you as potential areas to invest, so we don't have to pigeonhole a certain investor. But as someone that's so deeply ingrained in it, Matt, is there anything that you see out there that you're like, this whole area's got something going on?
I think, it continuously evolves. At times I'm a little weary of entrepreneurs that follow trends, especially in technology, that can live in a hype cycle where, 1 year everyone's talking about blockchain or cryptocurrency, the next year they aren't. That's just one that, but there are trends that you can follow and kind of see what's happening. Obviously consumer behavior is shifting radically given the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are still, I think, sorting out how that's changing in both the near and the long term, and that'll impact a lot of different industries. It's obviously impacted tourism and travel. I think that it's going to have an interesting implications on commercial real estate, and healthcare as we see it. But I think too, entrepreneurs, I think, can have an opportunity to exploit regulatory changes and build nice defensible businesses around that if they're watching certain unsexy regulations in different industries. We're using the term unsexy a lot.
Hey, that's
today,
okay. Ecosystem and unsexy. Those are
I think that it is, if it's a really obvious idea, somebody's probably already had it. So I think usually I like to see an entrepreneur that has domain experience in the market they're working in, and has experienced the problem they're solving, or knows a lot of people that have experienced the problem they're solving, and that's really what will, I think, make a successful entrepreneur willing to live the roller coaster of starting and running a business, because I feel like every entrepreneur has been tested through the COVID-19 pandemic and their ability to take punches that they may never have expected.
Yeah.
So.
I want to come back to that, so hold that thought.
Sorry,
but,
that was a
no,
long-winded
that's a great
answer.
thought. I do want to talk about COVID-19 in just a second, but I do want to hear from you from the investment side. Are there areas that you're maybe curious to find more pitches on, or opportunities that you see that are out there that you wish there were more companies entering into?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to take us back to COVID sooner than we thought.
Yeah,
but
that's
obviously, COVID is a terrible thing, but it has introduced a lot of challenges that are open opportunities to solve. So anything around, what are we going to do around education? Because our students can't be in the classroom as much as they once were. Matt mentioned health tech and figuring that out, because now we're all figuring out that working virtually actually is a thing, and business can continue. So I think while I try to be industry agnostic, while we try to be industry agnostic, I think that there are certain opportunities that arise, and I know Matt said that you hate to follow the trend, but we do know one thing with COVID, that it'll probably be a while before anything goes back to normal. So trying to capitalize on things like that.
So let's come back to COVID for a second. How has the community responded to it? Are you seeing people take actions one way or the other because of the virus?
I think tech, in a lot of ways, unless if you're focused in specific verticals, like I mentioned, travel or certain things, has been relatively not impacted too badly. I think that what entrepreneurs are encountering is, maybe their sales cycle has been thrown off by COVID changing how companies operate. I've heard a lot of that as not hearing back from prospects as quickly as possible, and corporate plans being changed and altered because of that. But the fundraising environment, and I'm looking at national numbers because there isn't really great state or local data, but the fundraising environment seems to have been a little bit negatively impacted by it. You've seen that go down, but I think people are readjusting their expectations, and people are still out in the market talking to entrepreneurs and meeting with them and writing checks. There are a lot of local companies that have recently closed rounds, and some of them have been accelerated by COVID.
And taking a true entrepreneur and give them a ton of free brain space, are you seeing an uptick in ideas and potential companies? Like, people are having more ideas because we've got really nothing else to do but innovate. We can't go anywhere, so are we coming up with company ideas?
I'm coming up with company ideas myself, actually. I'm kidding.
All right.
Yeah, I think COVID also slowed people down. So I never stopped personally taking meetings with entrepreneurs, and because I'm working from home and a little more stationary, not going, leaving the house as much, I can take some of these virtual meetings more frequently. So I have had an uptick in meetings. When COVID first hit, I think it was kind of a shock to everyone. So you did see this time where investors were taking a step back and figuring out how can they focus on existing portfolio companies and support those entrepreneurs such that they're going to survive this, right? Because we didn't know how long this was going to last. I think over time and more recently, you're seeing investors get back engaged, more willing to take meetings, and understanding that actually, from a investor standpoint, this may be a bargaining time for you. You may be able to get a really good startup at a pretty decent discount due to COVID. Unfortunately,
Right.
That sounds bad, but I think that some investors are coming in with that mindset now, and so they're re-engaging and reconnecting with the ecosystem.
And we're hunting for hockey sticks. That's what
Absolutely.
we're looking for. Well, while we're talking about startups and the calendar and how we've been affected by the virus, the real Super Bowl of startups in Milwaukee and Wisconsin is Startup Wisconsin Week and Startup Milwaukee Week. And I remember years ago when I was at WTMJ Radio, you came in the office and told us about this thing, and we're like, what? And you've turned it into the main event of the startup scene year after year. So first of all, congratulations. And what's happening this year for Startup Wisconsin and Milwaukee?
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to point out that WTMJ's support is a legacy organization, an iconic Milwaukee radio station, which I grew up listening to and actually interned at. That support of this new initiative that was grassroots at the time helped establish this, I think, great community event. I'm obviously biased, but I think it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs or people with startup ideas to really learn about the different resources and organizations that are in Milwaukee, and now it's scaled across the state of Wisconsin in 10 different cities. So November 11th to 18th is when it takes place. Really, how we put it together is we invite any organization that's supporting high growth entrepreneurship to participate and host an event or partner with other organizations to host events. And we have some organizations that have hosted like the same event now for 5 years. And we're really excited about it. This year it's going virtual, obviously, but the idea is to connect, educate, and celebrate high growth entrepreneurship in Wisconsin. So, historically we've had dozens of events virtually, and we will have dozens of events as well. And now you can actually go, if you're sitting in Milwaukee and you find a workshop in Beloit or Madison or Green Bay interesting, you can now from your living room go visit that event. And likewise, those people from all across the state can participate statewide and network and meet entrepreneurs. The reason why people attend events is to serendipitously run into people and connect with them and meet them. And so we're investing heavily in a digital platform to ensure those serendipitous connections still happen as we go virtual and have a lot of events.
Well, the show must go on, right?
That it must.
Got to have it. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time for this episode. So right now, Dana, there is an entrepreneur that's thinking about an idea, and because they're a good, smart entrepreneur, they're watching this show to get all the answers to the tests from you two. So tell us right now, what do they need to know that we haven't covered yet? What's that nugget they can take away and think, yeah, that was the missing piece for me to take the journey to start my own thing?
Yeah, I would tell them to research Act 255 because Wisconsin has implemented tax incentives for investors that choose to invest in early stage startups. So Act 255 is a tax incentive for investors that makes the startup more attractive. So as a startup in Wisconsin, you can go and you can become a qualified new business venture, is what it's called. So look that up, QNBV. Become QNBV certified because that just makes your opportunity look that much more attractive to investors.
And just for a little perspective on that, so from an investor's side, that essentially lowers your risk because the money is not as expensive. Am I looking at it the right way?
Yeah, it's all about return, right? So that's one of those things that has a positive impact on return and mitigates a little bit of the risk.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Matt, anything from you? If you're an aspiring entrepreneur, the show is all about the big opportunity that exists in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, something that they should take away so they can start their company.
I would say go talk to a customer in the next week. I think it's really important that people get out and get their idea, no matter how half-baked it is, in front of people that you want to buy your product. Often that's where I see entrepreneurs who have spent a lot of time strategizing in their basement or in their head, and I'm guilty of doing this too with my startup ideas. And they don't let the rubber hit the road. And I would just encourage you to go, if you have an idea, somebody that you're not related to, maybe directly, because obviously your friends and your family are going to think your idea is amazing. But go and try to make the rubber meet the road as quickly as possible, and then worry about how to build the technology or find the right technical co-founder or move forward with your idea. And
Does that mean I got to go talk to people? I got to go talk to customers? I got to sell?
Got to get out there.
What are the
Pat,
guys-
I don't know how you haven't started a company. Well, you have started
I've
a
started
company,
a few
yeah.
things, but,
But you got to go out there, and you're a great person to go do that.
One of the guys that I admire talks about building in the open and getting people's buy-in along the way to make sure that it validates as you go if you do that. Well, we could double the amount of time and absolutely fill it to help up the ecosystem in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, but there's a lot of opportunity out there. And Dana and Matt, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Did we get it all? Thanks to Dana and Matt for sitting down and sharing the opportunity for startups in Milwaukee and Wisconsin here on YG Roundtable, built by Max Weiss and sponsored by Health Payment Systems. Well, you get what the show's about by now. We have conversations with subject matter experts, and we go deep into issues so we can stay up to date and follow the trends. Do you have an idea for an episode of YG Roundtable? Maybe you'd like to appear. Cool. Hit us up on our website, younggunsmovement.com, and we'd love to consider you for an upcoming episode. This one, man, it was great. Thanks to Matt Cordio and Dana Guthrie. I'm Pat Miller, your host. Thanks for tuning in.